This happened when I was a little 6-year-old girl. I'm 22 now, by the way. My family traveled to British Columbia for my aunt's wedding. I was the flower girl, and the wedding took place at a more remote church ground, right beside the ocean with some beautiful docks. At first, the wedding went off with no issues. I tossed some flowers around and scratched at my itchy dress. Following the ceremony, everyone came outside to take photos on the docks. I was distracted playing around in the dirt while the wedding party moved down to the dock without me. My mom, of course, was distracted talking to her sister, and I was usually glued right to her side anyway. While I was drawing in the dirt with a stick, a man in a suit approached me. He didn't look particularly dangerous. He said he was a cousin or something of my now uncle. He did look a bit familiar to me as well, but I didn't know why. He said my mother and auntie had tasked him with watching me while they went and took photos and did all that adult stuff. I didn't know any better, so he took my hand and began walking me not back to the church where the reception should be, but towards the dirt road leading out of the property. Everything was fine and dandy, and we were now almost up the road where the tree line blocked the exit. All of a sudden, from behind me, I heard my mother scream, "Don't you fucking touch my daughter!" I turned around to see her sprinting down the dock, taking off after us. Now for context, my mom is a bit of a heavier woman, but that is the fastest I have ever seen her run in my entire life. She was almost foaming at the mouth, she was so enraged. The man squeezed my hand like he was going to try and make a break for it, but I guess he decided it was unwise when the rest of the guests saw my mom screaming and running, and they all started to make a beeline for us too. He jumped into the woods beside the dirt road. It turns out nobody else recognized him. When the police came, there wasn't much they could do, because a statement from a scared 6-year-old isn't very useful. The police ended up assigning someone to sit at the only entrance of the property, whilst the reception took place in case he came back for whatever reason. My mom kept me glued to her after that, and left a little bit early from the reception with my brother and I in tow. As we were heading back to the hotel, though, it dawned on me that that man was from the hotel. I had seen him looming about at the swimming pool occasionally, and throughout the continental breakfast room. Apparently, he was eavesdropping, and somehow found out we were going to that wedding. I told my mom, and she was furious. She told the hotel front desk, and got me to tell them what he looked like. With the key information that he was wearing a suit, they told us that he had already checked out in a hurry, and left long ago. They said they would file a police report with the information he had provided when checking in, though he had paid for the room with cash, so there was no way of knowing if he was using an alias or not. My mom decided to take us to another hotel on the other side of town that night. The police never followed up with her, and a few days later we went back to my home province. I never understood how much danger I really was in until I finally got a little bit older. We moved to Connecticut the summer before I entered 6th grade, so 2001, into a beautiful new house in one of the most beautiful towns you can imagine. It was a bit more rural than we were used to in New Jersey, but it was an adjustment that we could make. My sister is 2 years younger than me, so she was going to 4th grade at the time, and yes, it's relevant. We came from a neighborhood where we were all super close, and everyone knew one another. Block parties every summer, kids running back and forth to one another's houses. We were quite sad to leave it behind. Within the first few weeks, we met some of our neighbors. Everyone was what we soon defined as very Connecticut. It was all a bit surface, and nobody had that New Jersey warmth that we'd become used to. Judge New Jersey all you want, but people are really friendly there. In particular, our neighbors directly across the street seemed very odd. The mom would always come over to vent to my mom about her sons and husband, or ex-husband. I don't know, we couldn't really figure it out at the time. My mom was a sweetheart, so she was always welcoming and warm to her. The holidays came around, and the neighbor boy across the street was in my sister's 4th grade class. My sister came back slightly alarmed with what had happened in class one day. The students were asked to make a Thanksgiving turkey out of a traced drawing of their hands. On each finger, they were to write things they were thankful for. The neighbor would write things like being a loser, hating myself, very dark things for a 4th grader to consider. Fast forward to Christmas, and my mom hears that they have nowhere to go for the holidays. She politely invited the mother and 2 sons over to our Christmas Eve annual party. The boys were so strange. The whole time they just listened to Japanese techno with their headphones glued firmly on and never spoke to anybody. They headed right into our basement to just sit around and play video games the whole time. It was super weird how they didn't want to interact with anyone. The younger one, though, was always much stranger than the older. The neighbor mom would always open up to my mom and aunt, who works with special needs students, about how he would often hurt himself, how he needed to be put in a special needs program, but that he could never quite be diagnosed. They thought he was on the spectrum at first, but that quickly proved to not be the case. We always assumed she'd been confiding in them because my aunt was experienced with special needs kids, and she looked like she desperately needed some advice. The Christmas Eves stand out to me because they were at our home in a very intimate setting, but we saw them on a daily basis. My sister and I would come home from school, telling my mom about how weird the younger neighbor boy was. We just always felt something was very off. I'll never forget her just telling us, just be nice to him. You don't know what he's capable of. That struck me as so odd at the time, but we listened to her, of course. I don't know if his mother told my mom something and that scared her and made her say it, or if she just had a gut motherly instinct. Recently after that, and I can't quite remember if this were middle school or high school, I think I was in 9th grade, and my sister and the younger neighbor boy were in 7th. We all rode the bus together. What my mom said stuck out in my mind, so I decided that day I'd try being a little bit friendlier to him than usual. There was snow all over the ground, and the younger neighbor boy was drawing something in it, muttering something to himself. Kuku miai luku. No idea how that should be spelled, but that's what he was saying on repeat, just drawing in the snow. It stuck with me. I decided I'd greet him. Hi, Adam. Good morning. No eye contact. I'll bomb you, he said, never turning around. We let it slide. Came home and told my mom. She just reiterated, be nice. You don't know what he's capable of. And keep in mind that we were young kids. We didn't know what to take seriously and what not to. I wish we had done more. It's also important to keep in mind that he wasn't someone who was bullied or made fun of. He was always off in the sense that he couldn't hold eye contact or a conversation, or even say hello. But I never once saw kids make fun of him. He was a loner, but it seemed to be by choice. I didn't know why we were cautious or afraid around him, other than the fact that he never showed any warmth. It seemed almost like he had zero humanity. We knew that he had special needs, so we never really second-guessed anything. We just always tried to be polite and friendly as possible. When the bus would drop us all off at our respective houses, he would run all the way up his driveway on the hill with his hands by his sides, then turn around and kind of make this hissing noise down at everyone, making claws with his hands. It was weird, but we were all kids, and there were always a couple of kids in school who were a little strange. We just took it to be something like that. They were invited to several Christmas Eves after that, so my memories kind of blend together here. One year, the neighbor mom just started screaming out of nowhere at my innocent grandmother just for being a Yankees fan. She was a Red Sox fan. It was beyond weird, because my grandma is the most cutest and inoffensive lady of all time, and was in no way trying to start an argument over sports at all. It was as though the woman just clearly had this weird switch go off. She was always pretty nice to me, but I'll be honest, we all rolled our eyes every time my mom invited them. It was always such forced conversations with her, and as a teenager, I wanted nothing to do with being cornered into another chat. I think, though, that she must have just been really lonely. The following year, and the final year they were invited to Christmas Eve, was when she got into it with my mom about having guns in the house. The boys only attended the first couple of Christmas Eves, so after that it was just the mom. Somehow the topic of guns was brought up. The neighbor mom started telling my mom about how she had guns all over the house, and she always took her younger boy to the shooting range all the time. My mom said she didn't agree. She wasn't trying to argue, just stating her opinion, but the neighbor mom got so out of hand about it. Very defensive, ultimately getting very aggressive about how she grew up in New Hampshire, and that's just the way of life there. She would tell us stories about how brilliant the younger boy was, that he had hacked into some of the government's highest levels of security, and the CIA showed up on his doorstep. We have absolutely no idea if this is true or not, but that's what she told us, so it became an ongoing joke whenever anything strange happened at our house. There were a few odd things throughout the years. Our internet would be clearly messed with, lights would flicker in the house. We would joke that it was the young boy each time it did. It wasn't until December 14th, 2012, that we knew just what he was capable of. I was out of college, working outside of Philadelphia. My sister was still a student in college, and my youngest brother a student at the high school. Early that morning, my dad heard the gunshots that killed the neighbor mom, Nancy Lanza. He assumed it had been a hunter in the area, maybe just a little bit closer than usual, until the FBI suddenly showed up, and he had to evacuate the house as snipers lined our entire driveway. My mom was at the mall, and we were all frantically calling one another as the news broke slowly throughout the day. At first, they had his identity wrong, said it was his older brother, but we all knew it had to have been him. Thank God for my mom making sure we were always as nice as possible, although I don't know that it would have stopped him. I wish we had done more at the time. I wish we knew to do more. We didn't, though. We didn't want to assume the worst out of someone, but I really wish we had. 20 students, 6 teachers, all killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School that very day. The worst act of evil I've ever experienced so directly in my life, and I hope I'll never fucking experience that again. I'm thankful that we survived growing up across the street from him, but we feel gutted for those who didn't get so lucky. Kids, just little kids, in a place that should be the safest haven for them in their youth. I hate it so much. I know I'll never see him again, but regardless, Adam Lanza, let's never meet again. As a 23-year-old assistant manager at a pizza delivery place, I never would have imagined that a simple necklace would cause me so much fear. Even to this day, every time I see a dark early 90s Civic at night, I get the chills. Let me start at the beginning, though. I was an assistant manager with quite a bit of experience with the company, and had recently been transferred to a different store in the franchise. My boyfriend at the time also worked there, so I had no qualms with the idea of being there. I got along well with the employees as usual, too. I'm very easygoing and helpful by nature, which eventually landed me in a store of my own. I only had one bad habit. I smoked cigarettes a lot. This meant that I would have to leave someone else in charge of the money at some points during my shift. At this particular store, the key was on a lanyard so that it could be stored on your neck easily, making access to the till and money drawer very simple. One night, after a particularly stressful lunch rush, I went outside to take a smoke. I was the only person who solely worked inside, so I gave the key to one of the drivers, who I foolishly trusted. To save time and effort, I put the key around his neck, smiled, and said, "Thank you. I'll be back in just a few minutes." I ran out the door and inhaled my cancer stick as quickly as possible. Fast forward to a few days later. That driver, Pawan, asked for me to help him with some calculus homework. As a recent college dropout, majoring in mathematics, of course I agreed to assist. Everything went pretty smoothly. He was very kind, and I didn't think much of our interaction at the time. Very shortly after this, I was transferred yet again to another store. Fast forward to nearly a year later. All of a sudden, I start receiving phone calls almost daily from a number I don't know. Of course, I didn't answer. I mean, who answers a call from a number they've never seen before? Then I started to realize something, though. They were all from the same number. I thought in my mind, it must be some telemarketing number or something of the sort, so I continued to ignore these calls. One day after a 14-hour shift at work, though, I realized I had 22 missed calls from this number and 13 voicemails. I'm sitting there wondering just what the hell is going on, and then I decide to listen to the voicemails. All 13 were from Pawan. They started out professing his love to me, then they became more and more desperate, ending with 2 10-minute-long voicemails of him just breathing heavily and crying. I was terrified. What the hell was going on? I decided that the best thing to do was to call him back and tell him honestly that I was not interested. I was dating someone, and we would never be together. This was a difficult conversation to have with someone who was acting so crazily, but somehow I managed to do so through all of his grunting and sniffling. He didn't say a word the entire time. A few days later, one of the other Nepalese drivers from the same store, who I had remained friends with all of this time, called me and explained that placing a necklace around someone's neck was something that was performed during weddings in their culture. He told me that this was all a simple misunderstanding caused by me putting that key around Pawan's neck. I told him, of course, that a lanyard with a key on it doesn't count. He laughed and agreed with me. Just to be safe, though, I decided to change my number. About a month later, I moved out of my parents' house and into my own apartment. A few months after this, my mom called me and asked if I knew anyone with a dark green early 90s Civic. Initially, I told her that I didn't, but then I remembered that was the same kind of car that Pawan drove. I called back to let her know, and my dad answered. He told me that this car parked out in front of the house for the last couple of hours. I explained the situation to my dad, who went out and had a talk with him. I figured this would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. About 6 months later, I was closing the store up with 2 drivers. It was extremely busy, so we were there for quite a long time after closing. Suddenly, one of the drivers said to me with a frightened sound in his voice, "Hey, are you expecting someone?" I told him that I wasn't and started to go about my business. He glanced back at me briefly and then kept staring out the front window. He turned to me nervously. "I think this guy is going to try to rob us then." I rushed to the window and peeked out. It was hard to tell at first with the dark outside, but then I realized who it was, standing completely still, staring through the giant glass front windows. It was Pawan, with his dark green 93 Civic. He must have seen me there, looking out at him, but he didn't even flinch. I looked over to my coworker, and the first things I said were to call the police. After about 10 minutes later, they finally showed up. They came through the back and didn't initially see Pawan standing out front. When the deputy looked out and saw him standing there, he turned to me and asked for an explanation of what was going on. I told him everything that had happened, and he asked me if I felt unsafe. Of course, I responded with a simple yes. Suddenly, though, Pawan turned around and started leaving. The deputy got in his car and followed him. About 20 minutes later, I got a call from the deputy stating that it was safe for me to leave work. He told me that Pawan had told him that we were in a relationship for the last 2 years. He even called me his wife. I assured the officer that I was never in a relationship with this man. The deputy told him not to contact me again, or he would definitely press charges. I never heard from him again after that, thankfully. Still until this day, every time I see a dark-colored early 90s Honda Civic, I get the chills. I'll never forget my imagined marriage, and I'll never ever put another necklace around someone's neck. At least not one that's not my husband's. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you so much for watching this far, especially if you made it to the end of the video. If you have any criticisms or comments you'd like to share with me, please be sure to leave those in the comments below. I would just like to let you guys know, for a little bit of an update, that I am planning to continue streaming. I'm not sure how often, probably in between the days that I record videos or something, but Ghosts of Tsushima just came in, so I'm pretty excited about that. I kind of want to start from the beginning and let you guys share the experience with me. So hopefully I can get that set up soon and my internet doesn't keep crapping out in the middle of the stream like it did the last time. In addition to that, I've been talking a little bit with my friend, and I was thinking about maybe opening up a second channel where I do readings that are not horror related so much. Just reading various web novels I'm interested in, or maybe doing some fan dubs of comics or something like that, or just reading other general Reddit threads that are a little more funny and not as serious as the stuff I normally read. Let me know if you guys would be interested in that, and I'll think about doing that soon. I'll probably make a couple of test videos and release those next week, so I'll have a link to those as soon as those are ready. As always, the links to all of my social media are in the description below. If you would like to contact me, please be sure to take a look, as it contains my Facebook, Gmail, Twitter, and my Twitch account, which I'm planning to be using in conjunction with my YouTube streaming, so I'll actually be on that more. Fair warning ahead though, guys, I don't respond as much on Facebook. So if you want to get a hold of me a lot easier, be sure to email me or send me a message on Twitter, because I usually respond to those as soon as I can right away, but sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to respond to the Facebook ones. If you have a story that you'd like me to read, or you have a story that you'd like to send in yourself, please be sure to send me an email at bluespookyreadings@gmail.com. It's also listed in the description of the video. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in, the title of the story if it has one, and the theme if it has one as well. Please be sure when you're sending your stories that they're not too grammatically incorrect so that I can still read them. Also, please make sure they're at least a couple of paragraphs long and include as much detail as you remember and are comfortable sharing, because if they're too short, sometimes I get stories that are only like a paragraph long or so, and those are a little too short to be read in a video, because they only take me about 30 seconds to a minute to read, so yeah. I do appreciate everything you guys send in though, and I do read it all, so thank you very much. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, it can all be found in the description below the video as well, and I have links to the artists, as well as listing all of the songs contained in the video in the order of which they appear. As well, please be sure to check out my friend Alan's social media, which is listed in the description as well, because he does all of my thumbnails and basically all of the art for all of my channels and various projects, and he's a very good friend of mine. He does excellent work too, so if you want to get any commissions or you just want to see some cool horror art, he's the guy to definitely check out, so please be sure to give him some love. I think that's about everything for now, guys. There's not too much to update. I know I've been a little bit slacking on the end slate recently, so I'm gonna try to update that as long as there are updates to inform you guys on. So, sorry about using the same one for so long, but finally it's changed up. Yay! I think that's all for now, guys, though, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.